order, so like African American, then we'll move to Asian, I guess. Like 15 minutes on
Yeah.
each.
Yes.
So thoughts on African American, I guess just, because it was talking a lot about like the history of them, right?
Yeah.
And how like they got here and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I didn't know
what is
a lot.
everyone's prior knowledge to
I didn't know nothing,
this
honestly.
slavery?
Like, I knew there was slaves and like people would own slaves, but I didn't know like
The
the
extent
extent
to it.
to it. Yeah.
I think this opened my eyes, like, to the extent that
God
it was
damn.
fucked up.
Yeah, I know.
Like, the
Yeah.
shit they went through.
Sorry, I'm
So like,
cussing,
it was,
but
like I mentioned last week, I don't know if you guys remembered, but it's like I learned that like some of the slave traders from Africa, like some of the people who like sold slaves in Africa were African themselves,
yeah.
and that they came from like enemy tribes. Like, oh, what's the best way to do to your enemy? Get them out the country themselves. So like,
Yeah, that was
unfortunately, it was
that
like
was
some of their
shocking.
own people. Like the first time I learned about that, I was like, why have I never like learned about
I
this?
never knew that either.
Yeah,
And they never bring that up either.
Mm-mm.
No.
yeah,
What
and
were you
then.
gonna say?
I knew about that
Yeah.
actually.
Maybe I'm just-
I mean, it's been a couple years. It's been a couple years since I've known, but I
haven't been in high school.
He's like,
for
don't put words in my
ever.
mouth.
Because that's the crazy thing was like I actually learned it in college, like my freshman year in college. I was like, oh my god, it really is your own people sometimes. Like,
You really do.
yeah, because like I think like when we were talking about back then too, right? It's like the solidarity you have with your like so
Yeah.
obviously you feel solidarity with your people, right? But then
Yeah.
sometimes you just like slight differences where it's like, yeah, you can go fuck yourself, like you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
How much did you know?
Yeah, now I want to know.
I just knew that it was a lot of the times they were being captured by their own people and being sold to white people to
Yeah, because like I felt like a really common pattern whenever we read through like these modules, it's always white people being like, yeah, they're worth like cheap labor, or like, oh yeah, they'll be like a good servant or slave type thing.
Yeah.
So it's like,
through through this whole thing, I think I learned like how lazy white people are. They had everybody do their dirty work.
Literally.
Everybody. They're just so lazy.
They just took the credit
All
for
they did
everything.
was like
exactly.
kill, and not even with like swords, just guns and shit. Like
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
like what's also crazy, right? It's like back then, like during like when a lot of immigration was happening, like people like the Irish and like Scandinavia and stuff like that, they weren't even considered white, like to the other people, like the other white people. So like I felt like the white people was like a really exclusive club that was
Yeah.
like limited to like just like UK, British, like Anglo-Saxon. I think that's
it's
what
a
she
class system too. With
Yeah.
white people.
That's true.
That
Like
is
when
odd
people
to
say
learn
like the
about.
white trash and like
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
white trash, and then you have classy white
rednecks.
suburbs.
Yeah, I
And they
think
have like them Alabama brother sister shit.
Oh,
cousin fucker.
You're saying yeah.
I mean, like, but I think it happens in every race, to be honest with you. I mean, like, there's a saying in Spanish that
Mhm.
the worst enemy of a Mexican is another Mexican.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay,
El peor enemigo de un mexicano es otro mexicano. And that's all, I feel like that comes in, that it's in every race, every country you can think of, like, even, like, colorism, like,
Oh yeah, definitely.
you know, just,
Oh, speaking of colorism, in the Asian American section, I saw that's like Asians are more preferred, like the preferred minority, or they get treated a bit better because of the colorism, because we're typically a bit more like lighter than like
okay.
Hispanics and like Black
Yeah.
people. So there, we also kind of get a bit of that favoritism, and like it doesn't also help that like there's like a beauty standard in Asia where they're like white skin is preferred because it's like it kind of shows like, oh, you don't have like a labor job. Therefore, like you're able to afford just to stay inside and like not be in the sun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was really interesting to see like a bit of that correlation.
And sometimes we discriminate without even knowing. I feel okay. My brother loves Korean, like
Yeah.
everything Korean. He loves Korean girls, everything.
Ew,
You
I'm
know,
sorry.
that's his liking, whatever.
No, 'cause,
You
like,
know. But growing up, I was always mixed into the Mexicans, so I was always told, "Oh, you're Mexican. I'm Central American. I'm Guatemalan."
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
at the same time, it was like it bothered me. Growing up, it bothered me. I got in fights. I got like into it with people because they'd be like, "Well, you're brown, so you're Mexican." No, there's other brown people, and without even, I just thought of that right now. Without even noticing, like, I told my brother, "Oh, you're little chinitas." He's like, "They're Korean," and I'm like, "I'm sorry. How the fuck do you tell the difference?" Like.
That's the thing though, because like I'm sorry, but it's like, for example, right? Like so, like when I usually get asked like, "Oh, what's your ethnicity?" Like obviously some Asians have better ways to identify, but usually it's people be like, "Are you Chinese? Are you Korean?" It's like, "Are you like Japanese?" It's always like those three because they're specifically like East Asian, but it's like I'm Southeast, so like we're not South like the rednecks, but you know. Like,
I mean, like I know my now girl is Vietnamese, like you do it without even noticing. Like I didn't even notice that I would be in that, and it happened to me growing up. So
yeah,
I guess
like,
you just have to catch yourself.
yeah, because by the end we kind of also end up doing it too. So I was like, "Oh, you guys
It's a
are
mentality
Mexican,
you
this,
have,
that,
yeah.
something like that."
The generalization also like creates a whole like toxicity between like the like Latino group. Let's say like everybody gets mistaken as Mexican, so you start getting pissed off, and it's like, why is everything Mexican? So you start like getting mad at Mexicans instead of like the actual like white people just assuming everybody's Mexican.
I think
So
that's
it
like
creates its own thing. Cause like growing up, I used to always be like, why does everyone think I'm Mexican? I'm not Mexican.
Yeah.
I will say that we should divert back to the topic of African American and Asian.
I'm
sorry, this is
sorry, my bad.
I know this video like sorry.
I'm carrying it in my chest.
And so I was like, wait for
But it was cool.
She
It
was
was
thinking about this over
with the Asian topic.
Yeah,
I
so you
confused
know,
you
like,
guys. Sorry.
It also applies to like the like Asian like the generalization, right? Like
Yeah,
how
but
like
it's kind of like I was hoping we'd go more on topic because what we read and learned. That's why
now
I
we're
was like,
bouncing back.
Okay, we're
back,
back.
we're back.
Bring us back.
Okay, so like, what was it like Jim Crow laws? Those are fucking messed up. Like, have you guys ever seen like the caricatures of how they like illustrate black people back then?
Yeah.
Have you guys?
No.
So like they like exaggerate the features, give them like the like really big white noses, like big lips and stuff like that. Like they're like make fun of them for those features and like I don't know. You should look up a drawing or a photo of it. Well, was it? You guys ever heard of Jim Crow?
Probably, but do I remember?
How do I explain it? It's basically just laws that like discriminate black people from like doing basically anything.
Those were the laws that allowed segregation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you want me to look at Jim Crow laws?
Gee, this is why I want to do this because like he's a bit older too, so he has like I feel like he would have a lot of things to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
So
would
I
be
think
able
he
to relate so
mentioned
much.
he was born around like the 1950s, right? So he probably had like a good like 5 to 10 years of.
Well, even when he says like slangs or like not slangs, derogatory terms that people would call him, I half the time never heard what people would call him, and I don't know if it's just. Also, this might be because I feel like I grew up in a very dominant Mexican Hispanic area all the time. Like there was always like I always grew up with my cousins, so I was always surrounded with Mexicans. So maybe that's why I didn't hear this like the terms. But like half the things that he was saying, I didn't even know people would call African Americans that. So like when we're going over the things, it was kind of shocking because like I knew racism was a thing. Obviously, I'm not naive to the fact, but I just never thought of it out of other cultures. I always think about it like, oh, within myself. Does that sound selfish? But like that's how I would see it before. Like I never thought to think like,
I guess it's
what
like
is
you're
it-
just too busy.
what does an African American person go through in this situation that I was going through? Like I never sit there and put myself in their shoes. I'm always just like, damn, like this is what I went through because I'm Mexican, and I think that's an issue that we all tend to have. That we selfishly think of ourselves. Okay, majority. I'm sorry.
Well, 3 out of 4
3
here.
out of 4.
No, because like
But not everybody, even if we don't recognize it, we have those prejudices in our head. Even if we think we don't, we do.
Yeah, I
one
would
way
say
or
though,
another, yeah.
because like, was it like growing up as Asian, right? Like, obviously, there are some Asians out there who do kind of act like they're the second white people, and like I would hear stuff where they would like talk smack about other races and they would kind of like look down on them. And growing up, I was always like, man, what the fuck is your guys' problems? Like, by the end of the day, we're also people of color. Like, I don't see why you guys are shitting on other races.
Yeah.
And it goes back to like that model minority type thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, what was it? Yeah, it's like growing up, I was just like,
Do you think that gets to their head?
yeah, like sometimes gets to your head. Like I remember you were mentioning the article of COVID, right? Like there's a lot of like attacks on Asians. I feel like generally, I feel like it was kind of a wake up call for some of them because it's like, hey, by the end of the day, even though you're kind of like the minority, like the model minority, and you kind of have a bit more of a privilege than the other ones.
Yeah.
By the end of the day, you're still a person of color to these people. So like obviously, you know. Like,
Yeah, I feel like a lot of those times, those people have never really entered like white spaces. Like they never really got that slap in the face.
yeah,
So they still think they're
Yeah,
model
because
minority.
they've never really entered that like blue eyes, blonde hair space.
Nobody has challenged them. is what it is. Nobody has challenged them to show them, actually, you're not white.
Yeah, like I felt like some of them kind of did have to get like a bit of that dose of reality.
Yeah.
Just like in my personal opinion, because there are some of them out there who really do kind of act like, you know.
So in your personal life, have you experienced that where, I don't know, how do you fit in your family? As
It's kind
because you're very outspoken
yeah.
and you're very liberal. So do you have older generations in your family where you're like, girl, you're crazy type thing?
So my dad specifically, so my dad's born in the 1950s and my mom's born in the 1970s.
Okay.
So what was it? So my parents are very conservative. So like, I came home and my mom had a MAGA hat on the table and I was like, get this fucking shit out of my face, like.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I grew up with like more conservative values, but it was but obviously because I was growing up in America, obviously I would be exposed to like different things at school versus at home. So it was literally kind of like the East versus West type thing, and it was just kind of like obviously like in a sense it's kind of finding a balance because I like when I was like reading through the stuff, I was kind of like I felt like I had a bit of an identity crisis. So I was like, I feel like because I was born and raised in like a more Hispanic / Black like area, I feel like because like you guys, right? You guys have like, I'll hear you guys like speaking Spanish to each other in class and like, damn. I was like, you guys kind of have like a solidarity, I guess, like a way to like kind of connect with each other.
Okay.
But I don't have that.
Okay.
So like, I feel like I just don't have like other Asians to connect to. But the thing is, like, when I actually meet other Asians, I just feel so weird around them because it's like, I was just kind of born and raised in such a different way from you guys. Like when I go to like Orange County or something, right? Like, I don't know, they're just, I feel weird around other Asians.
Okay.
Like you're not too Asian for them and you're not too white for the whites in a
No,
way?
I mean, I'm not trying to blend with the white people, but because it's like, I feel like I'm not like Asian enough with them, and I feel like obviously because I'm Asian, I can't
fit in
stand
with
like,
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just kind of was like stuck in a weird in between sometimes.
Okay, so when you go home, how do you explain to your, not explain, but how do you act towards your family? Like, are you this liberal or do you have to be more
I make it really
conservative?
obvious to them, like, cause like my mom, like, you know, they're conservative, so they're like homophobic and stuff like that. So like, I will like say like sometimes I do catch myself having like, you know, it kind of slips for a second. I was like, whoa, hold on. I was like, I'm not trying to be like that, and I kind of correct myself, cause like, you know,
But
like
it's kind of like what's rooted. Yeah.
Yeah,
kind of like, yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, cause I'm only asking because growing up, for example, I grew up in Rialto, where it was mainly African American, and when I would go home, my mom didn't, you know, we were scared of African Americans. My dad was homophobic. So all of that mixed in, you know, growing up, I was like, man, I don't fit in with my parents but I accept everybody and I love everybody, you know. Things have changed for them, but I feel like as an older person and as a parent, things change for you. So, for example, like I struggle with the whole pronoun stuff and the non-binary stuff. I struggle with it. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But it's just, that's why I'm just like, was it hard for you growing up and now when you meet Asians? Were you that model kid? Like you had straight A's?
So I will say like, especially in school, right, I would have more of a bias with my teachers because usually it's because like, well, I don't really like act out like that. Like obviously, you know, like I could be outspoken with my opinions, but I'm not gonna like, you know, like get into fights or something like that. So like I did receive more of a bias towards from my teachers compared to like my other peers who weren't Asian. And I actually remember like thinking once, I was like, dude, just shut the hell up and just sit down, like, cause like a lot of times, you know, they would act out and the teacher would like have to like waste class time like trying to like get them back into control. So and I was just like, at first I was just kind of thinking like, damn dude, like, can you guys just not? And then like when I was reading the Model Minority, I was like, oh wow, like, it kind of feels, like I kind of like see myself mirrored in that.
Okay.
Where it's like they're saying like, oh, they like white people say like, oh, why can't you be like them?
Mm-hmm.
Like Asians like model minority, and I was like, ooh, it kind of feels like I'm playing into it, but at the same time it's just like just me in general, like I'm just not that type of person to like, you know, like act out or stuff like that. So just like, I don't know, it just felt weird.
So it feels like
I don't know.
you don't want to fit into the stereotype, but you also don't want to be the. I get what you're saying. Because you don't want to be the bad Asian, but you don't want to be a good Asian and say that you're feeding into the stereotype of the model minority.
Yeah, kind of. It was just kind of like, I guess in this, like when I was thinking like, oh, like why can't you guys just like act better? It kind of felt like
you were
kind of like enforcing that thing as well. Because like obviously I have to acknowledge the fact is like, yeah, my peers are seen a bit different because of their like race as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, obviously my teachers have saw me, they're like, yeah, she's a good kid. So, you know.
Because you didn't fight back and you weren't disrespectful as.
I mean, obviously I know how to act correctly towards people when they deserve it.
I feel like a lot of times people also forget like the trauma like Asian people went through in like the very beginning. Because World War II was nasty to them, especially the Philippines. Like Japan did a lot too. China,
oh my God,
the
Japan
Philippines.
is. Oh my God! If
So,
you guys
like,
ever have the opportunity, I'm so sorry.
So like yeah, of course they like came here. They're like traumatized. They don't want to fight back. So like of course they were like they submitted to just like what they were asked to be.
Not to mention, like, also, like, we had, like, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, which both, like, America participated in. So it didn't, like, help, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I can't imagine, like, a soldier coming home having to fight there and coming back and saying, these people, like, moving in to our country and stuff like that as well. But to be fair, like, I don't know, if you guys ever have the chance to read up, like, war crimes these people did to, like, one another.
Japan did a lot.
Japan was awful. Like, Japan would kidnap women from, like, different countries, mostly Korea, and they would force them to, like, prostitution. And then, like, these women would be forced to, like basically, essentially get raped by 20 men a day. Like, they're awful.
And to this day, they don't, like, accept that as a fact. They won't apologize to Korea.
Like,
So that's like
yeah,
their
they don't,
beef
they
right
choose
now.
not to acknowledge it. And then, like, American soldiers, like, yeah, they would also rape, pillage, kill a lot of Vietnamese people, too. For example, right, the serial killer in the 70s, I think his nickname was Night Stalker. The reason why he was called a Night Stalker, right, because he would, like, sneak into, like, victims' homes. And you know how he picked up those skills? It's because his family member participated in the Vietnam War, and he would tell them stories about how he would rape and kill all these, like, little girls and stuff like that. And the reason why he was able to, like, stalk at night was because he taught them how to, like, sneak around, like, how...
Wasn't the Night Stalker like Richard something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched his stuff.
So yeah, just tidbits. But I was honestly surprised to see like a bit more of Asian American history, kind of like how far it went back. Because to be honest, like we covered like in high school, right? I felt like we covered a lot more like the Spanish American War, stuff like that. Or was it Spanish French, something like that?
I don't recall shit from high school.
Anyways, I remember the general people were learning about was like white, African American, like Hispanic, but like I don't remember Asians who were really ever involved in my history books.
I think all that was involved in my height was the internment camps. I think that was it.
Yeah, the Japanese internment camps. That's about it. Yeah, like, it was mostly just the
Like,
Vietnam
yeah,
War that
a
was
lot of
covered.
people, like, when they hear World War II, all they think is about Nazis, but like...
All I remember was the Holocaust and Rosa Parks.
Yeah, but
Rosa Parks in 1980.
and it wasn't even Rosa Parks. Did you see that video where like it wasn't even Rosa Parks that made the whole like
The big old thing? Yes.
Yeah, the whole
it was,
butt.
her name,
Yes.
it was another little girl that actually like did it.
And I remember the movie where Kunta Kinte came out. What was that movie? That's what I remember from high school history. This sucks. Because I was reading everything, like how they had slave codes. I
Yeah.
was like, that's some fucked up. Like these, listen, okay, because I work in a school district. When they discriminate on my kids, and what I mean, like my kids is like mostly
The
of
kids you
color,
monitor, so.
it pisses me off because I'm just like, okay. And I understand they are raised with you have to be advocate for yourself, especially the girls. The girls have been raised to where you have to be loud, you have to advocate, you have to speak for yourself, and that sometimes is looked bad upon because now you're being defiant.
Yeah.
You know, so it breaks my heart for these kids sometimes that they're picked on, the teachers, they stress me out. But the fact that they could do all these things, these horrible things to these, like they really didn't even think about like, you're hurting them. They just, I don't know, like where was their soul?
Yeah, I actually, there's like a section of that in Asian Americans where like, it was something called like the Page Act, but it was like barring specifically Asian women into the U.S. because they believe that they're like, they're like prostitutes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, they're like seduce the American man and stuff like that. And I was like, that's crazy, because there's like a stereotype of Asian women. They're like, oh, they're obedient, they're demure, they're quiet, and stuff like that. And like, especially as an Asian woman, just hearing that, it's just like gross. Because a lot of times I would see like, when I do see like interracial couples, it's usually an Asian woman with a white guy. And it's like, I guess, like, yeah, you go interracial, but like, it just kind of feels like, you know?
Have your parents ever said anything to you about, like, do they want you to marry within your race?
Well, back then, like, because like my parents are like divorced. I haven't seen my
Okay.
dad in years. But at least like for my mom, like at first she was kind of more like, yeah, like I want you guys to like, you know, preferably. It wasn't like an unspoken thing, but it's like she would prefer me and my brother to have like an Asian partner, but both of us have like a Hispanic partner. so-
Preference?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also just kind of like where we were raised, but it's like, we don't really want to be with Asian people.
Really?
Yeah, my boyfriend's half Mexican, half Ecuadorian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy. Oh my.
Your
Did
friend?
his parents cook?
His grandma. I live with his family, so like
Okay.
an Ecuadorian family.
What side is Ecuadorian?
I don't know.
Oh.
We're getting nervous.
Is it the dad side or
No,
the mom
that's
side?
what
I've
you
been trying to
meant.
look
Mom's
for food.
side.
That's why.
Oh, I was confused. I thought you meant like what side of Ecuador, and I was like, you guys
No,
are
no, no,
separated.
Because mom is that Ecuadorian.
No, mom.
Okay.
So she
She
cooks
cooks.
a lot of Ecuadorian
She probably
food.
cooks.
Nah, your cooking's an eye. It's also their grandma that cooks, but
Then she know how to cook because she old school.
yeah. But she doesn't wash her hands sometimes, so like.
That gives it more flavor, don't worry.
That's some taste that you won't find anywhere else.
Es más sazón.
Oh my goodness. You're Ecuadorian? Oh, okay.
But yeah, I will say it was just interesting just to learn the Asian Americans like studies part, because I was like, I never really heard of most of this stuff. Like I know
Yeah,
like
me either.
the railroads and stuff like that, but that's kind of it, I think.
I honestly didn't know you guys struggled in this country. I thought you guys had it pretty nice. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, that was
Yeah,
just my
I
naive
kind of felt
thinking.
that too. I was like, oh, I thought we always had it nice, but then, well, like obviously, like you know, like the Japanese, like internment camps and stuff like that, like mostly nice, but like
Yeah.
I didn't know it went that far because it was like it started like in the 1800s. So I was like, oh wow, like I didn't know like. Well, I don't know. It feels weird because like I say we, like at least as Asian people, but like whenever I see stuff like that, it's usually like the East Asians. Like I feel like it's mostly like the Filipinos that are probably just the most Southeast Asian, but like I don't know. It's like I can relate in a way as we're Asian, but I can't relate fully. I guess if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Well, because you were raised here. You were born
Yeah.
here, right?
Yeah, but it's also just kind of like I'm Vietnamese, so it's like I can't exactly like fully identify myself with like a Korean or a Japanese person or you know a Chinese person. So,
But you get the gist of it, because, I mean, like, I can't identify with Mexicans, but I get most of it.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like that's why we always jump back to like Mexican or Hispanic.
But it
that's
goes back
how
to
we
the
can.
generalization too. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I just play along with it too. Like, today I'll be from, Michoacan. And then, I don't know, I just make shit up too. Like, I
Whenever
really
I'm gonna
do.
be that person that day, that's who I'm gonna be.
well,
Like-
that's the problem though, because like a lot of Asian countries have done some things to each other, so it's like we have like there's a lot of like beef that kind of goes around sometimes, like China, right? Like I know Vietnam sometimes has a problem with China because they're still trying to take over some of our land.
Okay.
So yeah, and then like I know like
Yeah, because you guys
Taiwan
are
is
very
still-
proud of where you're from, huh?
Yeah, because like Vietnam does have like a lot of like Chinese influence because we were taken over by them several times throughout the centuries.
Okay.
So yeah, but the latest was like we do have like French influence because we got taken over by them too.
Okay.
Alright, but it is almost 6, so we gotta skedaddle.
Sorry, this would have been bomb if James was here, but.
Honestly,
Yeah.
we had to have his like
Because
perspective.
we have the one African American and the one Asian.
Exactly.